What's that can't stop laughing moment where you're in a situation you shouldn't be laughing? Back in 2004, I was at my cousin's funeral, and my aunt was in such a shocked state, she couldn't stop laughing. She was known to do this at funerals. Because laughing is contagious, I also started laughing a little bit, and I had to go to the back of the church, and to the bathroom to get it out of me. My dad used to say you'll either laugh or cry. I always choose to laugh when I can. Although there was plenty of tears at his funeral, I also laughed a lot. Whenever I think of him, I think something funny he did or said, and although I still miss him, it hurts less. So laugh whenever you can, it beats crying in my book. I was at church for my grandfather's 5th-year death anniversary, and the guy singing was so bad my grandma and me were almost died from laughter at it. It was more of a memorial than an anniversary. I did this at a wedding. They'd hired a terrible violinist for their entrance march, and it just kept getting more screechy and out of tune until finally I just burst out laughing. I did something kind of similar at my uncle's funeral. The funeral service turned into a sermon about how we're all going to hell unless we get right with Jesus. I'm not religious, but my mom is, and this was her baby brother's funeral. I noticed every time he said something about damnation, my mom would shake her head and let out this sigh. She didn't want this crap at his funeral. I'd also noticed that the pastor giving the sermon was constantly asking for an amen. I'd started counting them. So when I realized my mom was getting frustrated with how the service was going, I nudged her and whispered, 13, and told her what was going on. Every time we heard, "Can I get an amen?" I nudged her and told her the number. She was trying to be so quiet but kept laughing. It made her feel better at least. Total request for amens was 37. Not me, but my friend. She was getting fired from her job, and all she could think about was what'll it be, fellas? Mustard, or ketchup? From the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I like this, but I can only think of the one that is incredibly broken. Not going to lie, just thinking about that line is making me crack up too. My mother and father went to a funeral of one of mother's aunts that she was not close to. In fact, my father had never met her. As they stood at the open casket, my father said to my mother, "She just doesn't look like herself." Again, my father had never seen the aunt before. For whatever reason, this struck my mother as very funny, and she started laughing. She held her hands to her face and ran from the casket. Her sister saw this and thought she distraught and followed her out to console her. Where my mother had to explain that she was laughing and not crying and why. She was so pissed at my father, it was hilarious. When I was in my early 20s, my great-aunt, who we weren't close with, passed away. At the wake, my mom and I went up to pay our respects, and I said I haven't seen Aunt Dot in 30 years, which made my mom start laughing, which in turn made me start laughing uncontrollably. Thankfully, it was a packed funeral parlor and no one seemed to notice. At the wake for the grandma of my honorary sister and brother. At some point, the old biddies from her church decide the children need to come up and say goodbye to her in front of all these mourners, none of which I know. Also, this is Eastern Kentucky, where everyone knows everyone else, so already people are eyeing me, trying to figure out who the F I am and why I'm sitting with the family. Well, before I realize what's happened, the two of them have marched me up there with them and pinned me in between them. I'm awkward in the best of situations, and am supremely uncomfortable at funerals, so this is already my personal hell. So we stand there and stare down at her in front of hundreds of people, as this somber music plays and the priest instructs everyone to pray for us as we say our last goodbyes. She's wearing this double-breasted sailor suit thing, and Sis and I are making quiet, awkward comments like, "Well, she looks nice," when all of a sudden our little brother blurts out, "Anchors away, old girl," and effing salutes. So my sister lets out long drawn-out gasp of "what the F," and we just start trembling with laughter. You can hear all the old church ladies awing because it looks from the back like we're overcome with grief. As soon as we're able to control ourselves, we essentially frog march little brother down the aisle with our heads down and head straight out the door to the car. When all of a sudden our little brother blurts out, "Anchors away, old girl," and effing salutes. Yo, your bro is a comedian legend from that point on. I would have absolutely lost it. Sincerely don't think I could have stifled the laughter there. Lamau. For some reason, you reminded me of web link. I had a similar instance at my aunt's funeral a few years ago. The circumstances of her death were pretty freak. She was bringing iced tea out for her and my uncle when she tripped and hit the side of her neck on a lawn chair. My aunt was rushed to the hospital and listed in critical condition, yet her condition never improved. She was put into a medically induced coma and suffered a stroke which led to her demise. All of this happened within the span of 3 or 4 days. The funeral was held at a church. When my mom and I walked in, we were greeted by all of these pictures of her and my uncle, from their wedding day to before her accident. Meanwhile, my uncle is trying his best to hold it together, and I hear one of my cousins lament, all because of a lawn chair. The shock of his statement just hit me, then I realized I was going to bust out laughing. I put my hand on my mom's shoulder and put my head down, so my mom took it as I was crying and pulled me in for a hug. The timing was so awful, and I know my cousin wasn't meaning to be tone deaf. I'm so sorry about your aunt, but I also laughed when I read all because of a lawn chair. Sometimes the simplest statements are the funniest. God rest her soul. Praying gesture. I had this really nice but really awkward physics teacher in high school. He was a large nerdy man but spoke with a lisp and a very soft voice. Imagine the guy from Office Space asking for his stapler, that's how he sounded. One day he is giving his lesson and mid-sentence he goes from this voice to what sounded like Satan himself. Okay class please, deep hell voice, take out your books, cough cough, excuse me must have something in my throat. Then continued like nothing happened. I could not, for the life of me, stop effing laughing, and I was the only effing one. It was the most bizarre and effing hilarious thing I had ever seen. I had to walk out of the class to catch my composure. This was at least 15 years ago now, and I'll never forget it. I have replaced one of your books with the Necronomicon. Open them very carefully. Watch the teeth. He's a biter. I'm dying just thinking about this. I'd be laughing with you for sure if this happened. Dude, I would have literally died if I'd been there. Holy crap, that's exactly my kind of comedy too. Same, I'm absolutely losing it right now. I don't get why Original Post was the only one laughing. My answer was also in a classroom. I took Italian taught by this sweet little Japanese lady who was fluent in Italian, French, and Japanese. Well, she was very short and sat on one of those super tall office chairs that are used for sitting in front of podiums. She couldn't touch the floor with her feet and she started to roll out of the door into the hallway and she couldn't stop. I laughed so hard that I cried and had to go into the bathroom to finish laughing. Also, I was the only one laughing. She was frantically waving her arms and legs trying to stop rolling, but she couldn't. At a funeral, the pastor kept referring to God as the great comforter, and all I could think of was a tacky bedspread glowing with holy light. Every time he said it, my giggles got worse to the point I had to pretend I was crying really hard and left to hide in the bathroom. God manifests himself in many forms. And I will bow before his holy throne. Lyric sheet in church youth group. Visiting my grandmother's grave with my grandfather for the first time a few years ago. Expected tears and a solemn day. Instead, we passed a grave marked Wanda, and my grandfather said, "Well, I wonder what killed her?" None of us could stop laughing. My grandmother would have loved it. Leveled up dad joke. Granddad joke. Amazing. That sounds like a joke my dad would make. In school, we did a course on mythology and had a project where we had to write our own mythological stories for the creation of creatures/places/ etc. One kid wrote a story about how a man was abusing his horse, so the gods cursed him. One day his horse threw him onto a spear which went through the back of his head and out of his forehead, and he transformed into the first unicorn. I couldn't effing stop laughing for a solid 5 minutes. The teacher berated me for laughing at violence, but the kid and I both thought that was funny as crap. That kid was creative on writing stories, yes. But if I was there too, I'd join you on that 5-minute laugh. Lamau. Actually, this is a really cool idea for a mythical creature origin story. We should try and make it popular. Let's start a viral campaign. Any volunteers to spearhead it? In high school there was 3 religion courses you could pick: Catholic, Evangelic, Edit, I'm told it's Protestant in English, or neutral. You would have different topics in class and different destinations on the yearly trip. I picked Catholic, and on the yearly trip we went to a monastery. On the 3rd day, one of the exercises was to talk about death, So there's 20 kids in a circle of chairs and everyone's crying because everyone lost a loved one at some point and death is a hard topic. The teacher starts talking about how she imagines death to be like and begins to tell, I imagine after dying there to be a long, long spiral staircase. And you go down and down until there's a door and behind that door. The rest I didn't hear because my friend next to me whispers, a mother-effing kebab stand. We both sat there giggling for like 20 more minutes until the meeting was over. To this day I feel really bad. This is exactly what I expect to find, with my luck. Can I help you? This is the afterlife? Yup. All the kebab you can eat. Except Tuesdays. Why not Tuesdays? You have to man the stand on Tuesdays. I can think of worse afterlives. Can we not eat kebabs while we man the stand? It's too busy, you won't have time. Why would the teacher be going down when she died laughing out loud? Because there's kebab down there. I was actually thinking about it too. I mean, it would be best if she's going up, right? I would have lost my crap to be honest, haha, mother-effing kebab. My granddad had If You Don't Know Me By Now played as the curtains closed at his funeral. Shouldn't have laughed. Couldn't help it. Legend. Edit. RIP my notifications. Thanks for the silver and pieces of flair. My dad had Queen's Another One Bites the Dust on the way in and Meatloaf Spat Out of Hell on the way out. He was a character. Saving all of these for my eventual funeral. Your funeral's going to have a banger playlist. Tell me he wasn't going for the laugh on that one. Oh, he totally was. When I worked with a financial advisor, he misspoke and asked me to check a client's investment in Blackcock, instead of BlackRock, an industry fund. He didn't realize what he'd said, and he was super big on maintaining a professional, humorless working environment, so I couldn't point it out. I managed to keep a straight face long enough to excuse myself, then spent 15 minutes wheezing in a spare office. When I was like 17, I worked at an Ace Hardware. I found a guy looking at construction adhesives and sealants with the most confused look on his face, so I asked him what's up. I am looking for caulk. Hey, it needs to be black. Hey, and I need it to stay hard. Trying really hard to hold it together now. 1 minute, sir, while I find the guy that works in this department. I run off and find the guy that knows caulking and bring him back, introducing him to the customer as our resident caulk expert, and the customer nods at him approvingly. I then escape to the break room where I am dying laughing, trying to blubber explain something about hard black caulks to my other coworker. I'm in tears right now. That isn't my only caulk story from that place, either. The other one involved an old guy inquiring into our return policy for custom-cut flexible clear tubing because he didn't know what outside diameter he needed. Before giving an answer, he explained he was building a homemade catheter he intended to run up his pant leg, insert into his urethra, so he could piss while on the walking trail. Yeah, you are going to need a manager for that one, bud. Freudian slip. He sounds like a fun person to work with. During a cathedral confirmation liturgy, the bishop let out a resounding fart in the reverberant room as he elevated the host. Immediately, the deacon began swinging the incense pot because the altar boys kneeling directly behind the bishop started holding their noses and waving their hands. Because the altar boys kneeling directly behind, the one directly behind was safe since the bishop could only fart diagonally. Checkmate atheists. The spleen's gambit. I can't imagine the whole congregation didn't at least burst into stifled giggles. Why? What's funny about a deacon squeaking? The Squeakin' Deacons would be an awesome band name. Fart in church, sit in pew? Now I can't stop laughing. Which part of your laughter was inappropriate? How did it all end? On the best date of my life, I went to see a really stupid movie, A Walk to Remember, edit cause many are asking, with my first girlfriend. We were sitting in the 4th to 5th row from the screen, and 2 rows ahead of us were a group of younger girls. One of them is rushing back to her seat with her friends and she slips and falls. It was a nasty fall too, and even though I felt bad for her, I couldn't stop laughing. It was awful. I don't know why I couldn't stop, and I was even like, God, I know I shouldn't laugh, but that's just making me laugh harder. It took me at least 10 minutes to stop. Girl who fell. If you're out there somewhere, I hope my laughing didn't make you feel bad. To this day, I still don't really get why it was so damn funny to me. I would prefer the laughing. One time, me and an ex set up a hammock stupid high in the middle of his yard, and when I got off, I fell and landed back first on the metal support rod on the ground. In front of his whole family. They just stared and didn't say anything. LMFAO, I would have felt so much better if they just laughed with me. Actually, now that you mention it, I think her and all her friends were laughing about it. It just looked like such a nasty fall. Like she face planted. At any rate, I'm more uncomfortable with the fact of how long I laugh about it. I had to try my best to stop thinking about it, because as soon as I started to think about it, I'd bust out laughing again. This happens to a lot of us. And that girl will remember that day, and she will just laugh about it as well. I don't know, man. That girl was so excited to see that movie. I hope that didn't ruin it for her. Ninja edit, but then again, it was a really stupid movie. So maybe it's not as big a deal as I'm thinking it is. Reminds me of when I was around 10, I was perusing through books at the library while my mother was checking out some books at the front desk. I thought I had heard her call me, and as I semi-rushed to her, I tripped on one of those floor covers for electric plugs and smacked straight onto the ground face first. There were 3 teenage boys at nearby computers who just stared at me open-mouthed, and one asked, "Are you okay?" In my embarrassment, I tried to get back up to flee, but slipped again on my flip-flops and hobbled away in shame. I still think about that day at times, but if it makes you feel any better about the girl's experience, it makes me laugh and also makes for a funny memory. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.